ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शांति शांति शांति। नमस्कार मेरे dear friends, my dear friends. This is fourth video on the Talks with Swami Vivekananda. I start the fourth video with the question put up by disciple. Disciple. But many people are of opinion nowadays, sir, that with the increase of wandering monks in the country, much harm has been done to its material progress. They assert it on the ground that these monks ideally roam about depending on householders for their living, that these are of no help to the cause of social and national advancement. Swamiji, but will you explain to me first what is meant by the term material or secular advancement? Disciple, yes, it is to do as people in the West are doing by securing these necessities of life through education and promoting through science such subjects in life as commerce, industry, communications, and so on. Then Swamiji replies, but can all these be ever brought about if real Rajas are not, or Rajas is not awakened in man? Wandering all over India, nowhere I found this Rajas manifesting itself. It is all tamas and tamas. The masses lie engulfed in tamas, and only among the monks could I find this rajas and sattva. These people are like the backbone of the country. The real sannyasi is a teacher of householders. It is with the light and teaching obtained from them that householders of old triumphed many a time in the battles of life. The householders give food and clothing to the sadhus only in return for their invaluable teachings. Had there been no such mutual exchange in India, her people would have become extinct like the American Indians by this time. It is because the householders still give a few morsels of food to the sadhus that they are yet able to keep their foothold on the path of progress. The sannyasis are not idle, they are really the fountainhead of all activity. The householders see lofty ideals carried into practice in the lives of the sadhus and accept them from them such noble ideas, and this it is that has up till now enabled them to fight their battle of life from the sphere of karma. The example of holy sadhus makes them work out holy ideas in life and imbibe real energy for work. The sannyasis inspire the householders in all noble causes by embodying in their lives the highest principle of giving up everything for the sake of God and the good of the world. And as a return, the householders give them a few doles of food, and the very disposition and capacity to grow that food dwells in the people because of the blessings and good wishes of the all-renouncing monks. It is because of their failure to understand the deeper issues that people blame the monastic institution. Whatever may be the case in other countries, in this land the bark of a householder's life does not sink only because the sannyasis are at its hem. Disciple, but sir, how many monks are to be found who are truly devoted to the good of man? Swamiji, quite enough if one great sannyasi like Sri Ramakrishna comes in 1,000 years. For 1,000 years after this, After his advent, people may well guide themselves by those ideas and ideals he leaves behind. It is only because this monastic institution exists in the country that men of his greatness are born here. There are defects more or less in all the institution of life. But what is the reason that in spite of its faults this noble institution stands, yet supreme over all the other institutions of life? It is because the true sannyasins forego even their own life liberation and live simply for doing good to the world. If you don't feel grateful to such a noble institution, fie on you again and again. While speaking these words, Swamiji's countenance became aglow, and before the eyes of the disciple he shone as the very embodiment of sannyasa. Then, as if realizing deep within his soul the greatness of this institution, self-absorbed, he broke forth in the sweetest symphony. वेदांत वाक्येषु सदारमन्तो भिक्षान्मात्रेण च तुष्टिमन्तः अशोकमन्तः कर्णे चरन्तः कौपन्वन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः. Brooding blissfully in mind over the text of the Vedanta, quite contented with food obtained as alms and wandering forth with a heart untouched by any feeling of grief, thrice happy are the sannyasis with only their loin cloth for dress. Resuming the talk, he went on, for the good of many, for the happiness of the many is the sannyasi born. His life is all vain indeed who, embracing sannyasa, forgets this ideal. The sannyasin verily is born into this world to lay down his life for others, to stop the bitter cries of men, to wipe the tears of the widow, to bring peace to the soul of the bereaved mother, to equip the ignorant masses for the struggle for existence, to accomplish the secular and spiritual well-being of all through the diffusion of spiritual teachings, and to arouse the sleeping lion of Brahma in all by throwing in the light of knowledge. Addressing then his brothers of the order, he said, our life is Atmano Muksartham Jaganti Dhaya, for the sake of our self-liberation as well as for the good of the world. So what are you sitting idle for? Arise, awake, wake up yourselves and awaken others. Achieve the consummation of human life before you pass off. Arise, awake and stop not till the goal is reached. Talk number 11. Topics covered. Consecration of the temple of Sri Ramakrishna, place the house of the deity Babu Nabgopal Ghosh, Ramakrishnapur, Howrah, time 6th February 1898. Today the festival of installing the image of Sri Ramakrishna was to come up at the residence of Babu Nagopal Ghosh of Ramakrishnapur, Howrah. The sannyasis of the Mat and the householder devotees of Sri Ramakrishna had all been invited there. Swamiji with party reached the bathing ghat at Ramakrishnapur. He was dressed in the simplest garb of ochre with a turban on his head and was barefooted. On both sides of the road were standing multitudes of people to see him. Swamiji commenced singing the famous nativity hymn on Sri Ramakrishna, who art thou laid on the lap of a poor Brahmin mother, etc., and headed a procession, himself playing on the khol. All the devotees assembled there followed, joining in the chorus. Shortly after the procession reached its destination, Swamiji went upstairs to see the chapel. The chapel was floored with marble. In the center was the throne, and upon it was the porcelain image of Sri Ramakrishna. The arrangement of materials was perfect, and Swamiji was much pleased to see it. The wife of Nabagopal Babu prostrated herself before Swamiji with the other female members of the house and then took to fanning him. Hearing Swamiji speaking highly of every arrangement, she addressed him and said, "What have we got to entitle us to the privilege of worshipping Thakur? A poor home and poor means. Do bless us, please, by installing him here out of your own kindness." In reply to this, Swamiji jokingly said, "Your Thakur never had in his 14 generations such a marble floored house to live in. He had his birth in that rural thatched cottage and lived his days on indifferent means. And if he does not live here so excellently served, where else should he live?" Swamiji's words made everybody laugh out. Now, with his body rubbed with ashes and gracing the seat of the priest, Swamiji himself conducted the worship with Swami Prakashananda to assist him after the worship was over. Swamiji, while still in the worship room, composed extempore this mantra for prostration before Bhagava Sri Ramakrishna. स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्म स्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. I bow down to Ramakrishna, who established the religion, embodying in himself the reality of all religions and being thus the foremost of divine incarnations. All prostrated before Sri Ramakrishna with this mantra. In the evening, Swamiji returned to Bagh Bazar. Talk number 12. Guru Gobind Singh Psychic Powers. Place Balram Babu's residence, Calcutta, year 1898. Swamiji had been staying during the last 2 days at Balram Babu's residence at Bagh Bazar. He was taking a short stroll on the roof of the house, and the disciple with 4 or 5 others was in attendance. While walking to and fro, Swamiji took up the story of Guru Gobind Singh and with his great eloquence touched upon the various points in his life, how the revival of Sikh sect was brought about by his great renunciation, austerities, fortitude, and life consecrating labors, how by his initiation he Hinduized Mohammedan converts and took them back into the Sikh community, and how on the banks of the Narmada he brought his wonderful life to a close, speaking of the great power that used to be infused in those days into the initiates of Guru Gobind. Swamiji recited a popular दोहा couplet of the six. 1.25 पर एक चढ़ाऊं जब गुरु गोविंद नाम सुनाऊं. The meaning is when Guru Gobind gives the name, that is the initiation, a single man becomes strong enough to triumph over a lakh and quarter of his foes. Each disciple deriving from his inspiration a real spiritual devotion had his soul filled with such wonderful heroism. While holding forth thus on the glories of religion, Swamiji's eyes, dilating with enthusiasm, seemed to be emitting fire, and his hearers, dumb stricken and looking at his face, kept watching the wonderful sight. After a while, the disciple said, "Sir, it was very remarkable that Guru Gobind could unite both Hindus and Muslims within the fold of his religion and lead them both toward the same end. In Indian history, no other example of this can be found." Swamiji Man can never be united unless there is a bond of common interest. You can never unite people merely by getting up meetings, societies, and lectures if their interest be not one and the same. Guru Govind made it understood everywhere that the man of his age, be they Hindus or Muslims, were living under a regime of profound injustice and oppression. He did not create any common interest, he only pointed out to the masses, and so both Hindus and Muslims followed him. He was a great worshipper of Shakti. Yes, in Indian history, such an example is indeed very rare. Finding then that it was getting late into the night, Swamiji came down with others into the parlor of the first floor where the following conversation on the subject of miracles took place. Swamiji said it is possible to acquire miraculous powers by some little degree of mental concentration and turning it to disciple. He asked, well, should you like to learn thought reading? I can teach that to you in 4 or 5 days. Disciple of what will it be to me, sir? Swamiji, why you will be able to know others' mind? Disciple, will that help my attainment of the knowledge of Brahma? Swamiji, not a bit. Disciple, then I have no need to learn that science. But sir, I would very much like to hear about what you have yourself seen of the manifestation of such psychic powers. Swamiji, on once when traveling in the Himalayas, I had to take up my abode for a night in a village of the hill people. Hearing the beating of drums in the village sometime after nightfall, I came to know upon enquiring of my host that one of the villagers had been possessed by a Devta or good spirit. To meet his importunate wishes and to satisfy my own curiosity, we went out to see what the matter really was. Reaching the spot, I found a great concourse of people. A tall man with long bushy hair was pointed out to me, and I was told that person had got the Devta on him. I noticed an axe being heated in fire close by the man, and after a while I found the red hot thing being seized and applied to parts of his body and also to his hair. But wonder of wonders, no part of his body or hair thus branded with the red hot axe was found to be burnt, and there was no expression of any pain in his face. I stood mute with surprise. The headman of the village meanwhile came up to me and said, Maharaj, please exorcise this man out of your mercy. I felt myself in a nice 6 foot mood to do something. I had to go near the possessed man. Once there, I felt a strong impulse to examine the axe rather closely, but the instant I touched it, I burnt my fingers. Although the thing had been cooled down to blackness, the smarting the smarting made me restless, and all my theories about the X phenomenon were spirited away from my mind. However, smarting with the burn, I placed my hand on the head of the man and repeated for a short while the japa. It was a matter of surprise to find that the man came round in 10 or 12 minutes. Then, oh, the gushing reverence the villagers showed to me. I was taken to be some wonderful man, but all the same, I could not make any head or tail of the whole business. So, without a word, one way or the other, I returned with my host to his hut. It was about midnight and I went to bed, but what with the smarting burn in the hand and the impenetrable puzzle of the whole affair, I could not have any sleep that night. Thinking of the burning axe falling to harm living human flesh, it occurred again and again to my mind. There are more things in heaven and earth harass you than are dreamed of in your philosophy. This is, but could you later on even explain the mystery, sir? Swamiji, no, the event came back to me in passing just now, and so I related it to you. He then resumed, but Sri Ramakrishna used to disparage these supernatural powers. His teaching was that one cannot attain to the supreme truth if the mind is diverted to the manifestation of these powers. The human mind, however, is so weak that not to speak of householders, even 90% of the sadhus happen to be votaries of these powers. In the West, men are lost in wonderment if they come across such miracles. It is only because Sri Ramakrishna has mercifully made us understand the evil of these powers as being hindrance to real spirituality that we are able to take them at their proper value. Have not you noticed how, for that reason, the children of Sri Ramakrishna pay no heed to them? Swami Yogananda said to Swamiji at this moment, well, why don't you narrate to our Bengal that incident of yours in Madras when you met the famous ghost tamer? At the earnest entreaty of the disciple, Swamiji was persuaded to give the following account of his experience. Once while I was putting up at Manmatha Babu's palace, I dreamed one night that my mother had died. My mind became much distracted, not to speak of corresponding with anybody at home. I used to send no letters in those days, even to our mutt. The dream being disclosed to Manmatha, he sent a wire to Calcutta to ascertain facts about the matter, for the dream had made my mind uneasy on the one hand, and on the other our Madras friends, with all arrangements ready, were insisting on my departing for America immediately, and I felt rather unwilling to leave before getting any news of my mother. So Manmatha, who discerned the state of my mind, suggested our repairing to a man living some way off from town, who, having acquired mystic powers over spirits, could tell fortunes and read the past and the future of a man's life. So, at Manmatha's request and to get rid of my mental suspense, I agreed to go to this man, covering the distance partly by railway and partly on foot. We four of us, Manmatha, Alasinga, myself, and another managed to reach the place, and what met our eyes there was a man with a ghoulish, haggard, suit black appearance sitting close to a cremation ground. His attendants used some jargon of Madrasi dialect to explain to us that this was the man with perfect power over the ghost. At first, the man took absolutely no notice of us, and then, when we were about to retire from the place, he made a request for us to wait. Our Alasinga was acting as the interpreter, and he explained the request to us. Next, the man commenced drawing some figures with a pencil, and presently I found him getting perfectly still in mental concentration. Then he began to give out my name, my genealogy, the history of my long line of forefathers, and said that Sri Ramakrishna was keeping close to me all through my wanderings, intimating also to me good news about my mother. He also foretold that I would have to go very soon to far off lands for preaching religion. Getting good news thus about my mother, we all travelled back to town, and after arrival there received by wire from Calcutta the assurance of mother's doing well. Turning to Swami Yogananda, Swamiji remarked, everything that the man had foretold came to be fulfilled to the letter. Call it some for, fortuitous concurrence or anything you will. Swami Yogananda said in reply, it was because you would not believe all this before that this experience was necessary for you, Swamiji. Well, I am not a fool to believe anything and everything without direct proof and coming into this realm of Mahamaya. Oh, the many magic mysteries I have come across alongside this bigger magic conjuration of a universe. Maya, it is all Maya. Goodness, what rubbish we have been talking so long this day. By thinking constantly of ghost, man become ghost themselves, while whosoever repeats day and night, knowingly or unknowingly, I am the eternal, pure, free, self-illumined Atma, verily becomes the knower of Brahma. Saying this, Swamiji affectionately turned to the disciple and said, "Don't allow all that worthless nonsense to occupy your mind. Always discriminate between the real and the unreal and devote yourself heart and soul to the attempt to realize the Atma. There is nothing higher than this knowledge of the Atma. All else is Maya, mere jugglery. The Atman is the one unchangeable truth. This I have come to understand, and that's why I try to bring it home to you all. एक में मयम ब्रह्मणि नानास्ति किंचन. One Brahma, there is without a second, there is nothing manifold in existence. All this conversation continued up to 11 o'clock at night. After that, his meal being finished, Swamiji retired for rest. The disciple bowed down at his feet to bid him goodbye. Swamiji asked, "Are you not coming tomorrow?" Disciple, "Yes, sir, I am coming to be sure. The mind longs so much to meet you at least once before the day is out." Swamiji, so good night. Now it is getting very late. Talk number 13. Tithi Puja of Sri Ramakrishna, investing some non-Brahmin devotees with holy thread, Girish Chandra Ghosh, Karma Yoga or unselfish work. Its aim and utility. Place Belur, the rented month premises, year 1898. Swamiji was staying at the time at the rented garden house of Nilambar Babu, where the mutt had been removed from Alam Bazar. Arrangements had been made for Sri Ramakrishna's Tithi Puja nativity on a grand scale. On the morning of the auspicious day, Swamiji personally inspected the preliminaries of the worship. The inspection over, Swamiji asked the disciple, "Well, you have brought the holy thread, I hope." Disciple, "Yes, sir, I have everything is ready as you desired, but sir, I can't make out why so many holy threads are in requisition." Swamiji, "Every Divijati twice born has a right to investiture with the holy thread. The Vedas themselves are authority in this matter. Whoever will come here on his second birthday of Sri Ramakrishna, I shall invest him with the holy thread." These people have fallen from their true status, and the scriptures say that after proper expiation, those fallen in the way earn the right to investiture with the holy thread. This is the great day of Sri Ramakrishna's nativity, and man will be purified by taking his name. So the assembled devotees are to be invested with the holy thread today. Do you now understand, disciple? I have collected, sir, quite a good number of holy threads according to your instructions, and after the worship I shall, with your permission, invest the bhaktas with them. Swamiji, to the bhaktas who are not Brahmins, give this mantra of Gayatri here. Swamiji, communicated to the disciple the special Gayatris for them. By degrees, all the people of the land have to be lifted to the position of Brahmins, not to speak of Bhaktas of Sri Ramakrishna. Each Hindu, I say, is a brother to every other, and it is we who have degraded them by our outcry, don't touch, and so the whole country has been plunged to the utmost depths of meanness, cowardice, and ignorance. These men have to be uplifted, words of hope and faith have to be proclaimed to them. We have to tell them you are also men like us and you have all the rights that we have. Do you understand, disciple? Yes, sir, it should be so. Swamiji now ask those who will take the holy thread to finish their bath in the Ganges. Then, after prostrations before Sri Ramakrishna, they will have their investiture about 40 to 50 bhaktas, then duly received the Gayatri from the disciple and were invested with the holy thread. When receiving them, Swamiji's face beamed with profound delight. A little after this, Srijat Grish Chandra Ghosh arrived at the mutt from Calcutta. Now arrangements for music were made at the desire of Swamiji, and sannyasis of the mutt decorated Swamiji as a yogi. Swamiji now chanted with the sweetest intonation to the accompaniment of these of the Tanpura, the Sanskrit hymn beginning with Kojantam Ram Rameti, repeated in a low tone the name of Rama, etc. And when the chanting came to a close, he went on repeating with exquisite charm and holy words Ram Ram Sri Ram Ram. His eyes were half closed, and the natural sublimity of his countenance seemed today to have deepened a hundredfold. Everything remained spellbound for over half an hour. Talks with Swami Vivekananda. After the chanting of Sri Rama's name, Swamiji continued to sing a song of Tulsidas on Sri Ramachandra in the same intoxicated strain of mind. Then other music followed. After this, Swamiji suddenly took to putting off all the decorations he had on his person and began to dress Grease Babu with them. Then he declared, Brahmansa Deva used to say, our brother is the incarnation of Bhairava. There is no distinction between him and us. Grace Babu sat speechless all the time. A piece of Gerwa cloth was also brought and he was draped in it and uttered no word of remonstrance, for he had merged himself fully today in the wishes of his brother disciples. Swamiji now said, well, GC, you are to speak to us today about Thakur, and all of you, turning all round himself, sit quiet and attentive. Even then, Grease Babu sat motionless, voiceless like marble, absolutely lost in joy. And when at last he opened his lips, he did so to say, ah, what can this humble self speak of our Lord of unbounded mercy? Verily, in this alone I realize that mercy that to me, this lowly creature, he has extended the privilege of sitting and mixing on the same footing with you, sannyasins pure from your childhood who have renounced all lust and lucre. While speaking thus, the words choked in his throat and he could not speak any more. After this, some pieces of Hindi music were rendered by Swamiji. The devotees were now called to partake of refreshments. After refreshment, Swamiji came and took his seat in the parlor on the ground floor, and all the many visitors sat round him. According to a householder friend who had his investiture with the holy thread, That day Swamiji said, really you all belong to the twice born caste, only it is long since you lost your status. From this day again you become the twice born. Repeat the Gayatri at least 100 times daily. Won't you? The householder expressed his assent. Meanwhile, Sri Jat Mahendranath Gupta, Master Mahasaya or M, appeared on the scene. Swamiji cordially received him and made him take his seat. Master Mahasaya said, Swamiji, this is the anniversary of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, so you shall have to relate to us something about him. Master Mahasaya bent his head down smilingly in reply. Just now it was announced that Swami Akhandananda had come from Murshidabad with two pan, pan, pantuas which weighed 1 pound and a half. All of us hurried to see these prodigious pantuas. When they were shown to Swamiji, he said, take them up to the chapel for offering. Making Swami Akhandananda the subject of his remarks, Swami said to the disciple, mark you, what a great hero he is in work of fear, death, and the like. He has no cognizance, doggedly going on doing his own work for the welfare of the many, for the happiness of the many. Disciples, sir, that power must have come to him as the result of a good deal of austerities. Swamiji, true power comes of austerities, but again, working for the sake of others itself constitutes tapasya, practice of austerity. The Karma Yogins regard work itself as a part of tapasya, as on the one hand, the practice of tapasya intensifies altruistic feelings in the devotee and actuate him to unselfish work, so also the pursuit of work for the sake of others carries the worker to the last fruition of tapasya, namely the purification of the heart, and leads him thus to the realization of the Supreme Atma. Disciple, but sir, how few of us can work wholeheartedly for the sake of others from the very outset? How difficult it is for such broad-mindedness to come at all, as will make man sacrifice the desire for their own happiness and devote their lives for others. Swamiji, and how many have their minds going after tapasya with the attraction for lust and lucre working the other way. How many long for the realization of God? In fact, disinterested work is quite as difficult as tapasya. So you have no right to say anything against those who go in for work in the cause of others. If you find tapasya to be to your liking, well, go on with it. Another may find work as congenial to him, and you have no right to make a prohibition in his case. You seem to have the settled idea in your mind that work is no tapasya at all. Disciple, yes sir, before this I used to mean quite a different thing by tapasya. Swamiji, as by continuing our religious practices we gradually develop a certain determined tendency for it. So by performing disinterested work over and over again, even unwillingly, we gradually find the will merging itself in it. The inclination to work for others develops in this way. Do you see? Just do some such work even though unwillingly, and then see if the actual fruit of tapasya is realized within or not. As the outcome of work for the sake of others, the angularities of the mind get smoothened Down-end men are gradually prepared for sincere self-sacrifice for the good of others. Disciple, but sir, what is the necessity at all for doing good to others? Swamiji, well, it is necessary for one's own good. We become forgetful of the ego when we think of the body as dedicated to the service of others, the body with which most complacently we identify the ego, and in the long run comes the consciousness of disembodiedness. The more intently you think of the well-being of others, the more oblivious of self you become. In this way, as gradually your heart gets purified by work, you will come to feel the truth that your own self is pervading all beings and all things. Thus, it is that doing good to others constitutes a way, a means of revealing one's own self or Atma. Know this also to be one of the spiritual practices, a discipline for God realization. Its aim also is self realization, exactly as that aim is attained by jnana knowledge, bhakti, devotion, and so on. So, also by work for the sake of others. Disciple, but sir, if I am to keep thinking of others day and night, when shall I contemplate on the Atma? If I rest wholly occupied with something particular and relative, how can I realize the Atma which is absolute? Swamiji, the highest aim of all disciplines, all spiritual paths is the attainment of the knowledge of Atma. If you, by being devoted to the service of others and by getting your heart purified by such work, attain to the vision of all beings as the self, what else remains to be attained in the way of self-realization? Would you say that self-realization is the state of existing as inert matter, as this wall or as this piece of wood, for instance? Disciple, though that is not the meaning, yet what the scriptures speak of as the withdrawal of the self into its real nature consists in the arresting of all mind functions and all work. Swamiji, yes, this samadhi of which the scriptures speak is a state not at all easy to attain. When very rarely it appears in somebody, it does not last for long. So, what will he keep himself occupied with? Thus, it is that after realizing that state described in the scriptures, the saint says the self in all beings and in that consciousness devotes himself to service so that any karma that was yet left to be worked out through the body many exhaust itself. It is this state which has been described by the authors of Shastras as Jivan Mukti, freedom while living. Disciple, so after all it comes about, sir, that unless this state of Jivan Mukti is attained, work for the sake of others can never be pursued in the truest sense of term. Swamiji, yes, that is what the Shastras say, but they also say that work or service for the good of others leads to the state of Jivan Mukti. Otherwise, there would be no need on the part of the Shastras to teach us a separate path of religious practices called the Karma Yoga. The disciple now understood the point and became silent, and Swamiji, giving up the topic, commenced rendering in a voice of superhuman sweetness the song composed by Babu Grish Chandra Ghosh to commemorate Sri Ramakrishna's nativity. Who art thou lying on the lap of the poor Brahmin matron, etc. Talk number 14. Installation of Sri Ramakrishna at Belur Mutt. Shankaracharya Buddha, cause of the downfall of Buddhism, influence of pilgrimage, different methods of worship. Place the rented Math premises at Belur year 1898. Today, Swamiji is to perform a sacrifice and install Sri Ramakrishna on the site of the new mutt. The disciple has been staying at the mutt since the night before with a view to witnessing the installation ceremony. In the morning, Swamiji had his bath in the Ganges and entered the worship room. Then he made offerings to the consecrated Paduka of Sri Ramakrishna and fell to meditation. Meditation and worship for preparations were now made for going to the new mutt premises. Swamiji himself took on his right shoulder the ashes of Sri Ramakrishna's body preserved in a copper casket and led the van. The disciple in company of the other sannyasis brought up the rear. There was the music of bells and conches on his way. Swamiji said to the disciples, Sri Ramakrishna said to me, wherever you will take me on your shoulders, there I will go and stay, be it under a tree or in a hut. It is therefore that I am myself carrying him on my shoulder to the new mutt grounds. Know it for certain that Sri Ramakrishna will keep his seat fixed there for the welfare of the many for a long time to come. Disciple, when was it that he said this to you? Swamiji, pointing to the sadhus of the mutt, didn't you hear from them? It was at the Kasipur garden. Disciple, I see. It was on this occasion, I suppose, that the split took place between Sri Ramakrishna's sannyasi and householder disciples regarding the privilege of serving him. Swamiji, yes, but not exactly a split. It was only a misunderstanding, that's all. Rest assured that among those that are Sri Ramakrishna's devotees and have truly obtained his grace, there is no sect or schism. There cannot be they householders or sannyasis. As to that kind of slight misunderstanding, do you know what it was due to? Well, each devotee colored Sri Ramakrishna in the light of his own understanding, and each forms his own idea of him from his peculiar standpoint. He was as it were a great sun, and each one of us is eyeing him as it were through a different kind of colored glass and coming to look upon that one sun as party-colored. Of course, it is quite true that this leads to schism in course of time, but then such schisms rarely occur in the lifetime of those who are fortunate enough to have come in direct contact with an avatara. The effulgence of that personality who takes pleasure only in his self dazzled their eyes and sweeps away pride, egotism, and narrow-mindedness from their minds. Consequently, they find no opportunity to create sects and party factions. They are content to offer him their heart's worship, each in his own fashion. Disciple, so do the devotees of the Avatara then view him differently, notwithstanding their knowing him to be God? And does this lead to the succeeding generations of their followers to limit themselves within narrow bounds and form various little sects? Swamiji, quite so. And sects are bound to form in course of time. Look, for instance, how the followers of Chaitanya Deva have been divided into 200 or 300 sects, and those of Jesus hold thousands of creeds. But all those sects without exception follow Chaitanya Deva or Jesus and none else. Disciple, then perhaps Sri Ramakrishna's followers too will be divided in the course of time into various sects, Swamiji. Well, of course, but then this mutt that we are building will harmonize all creeds, all standpoints, just as Sri Ramakrishna held highly liberal views. This mutt too will be a center for propagating similar ideas. The blazing lights of universal harmony that will emanate from here will flood the whole world. While all this was going on, the party reached the mud premises. Swamiji took the casket down from his shoulder, placed it on the carpet spread on the ground, and bowed before it, touching the ground with his forehead. Others too followed suit. The Swamiji again sat for worship after going through the puja. He lighted the sacrificial fire, made oblations to it, and himself cooking paisa, milk rice with sugar with the help of his brother disciples offered it to Sri Ramakrishna. Probably also he initiated certain householders on the spot that day. All this ceremony being done, Swamiji cordially addressed the assembled gentlemen and said, "Pray to all of you, heart and soul, to the holy feet of Sri Ramakrishna, that the great avatara of this cycle, that he may, for the welfare of the many and for the happiness of the man, Bahujan Hitaya, Bahujan Sukhaya, reside in this holy spot from this day for a great length of time and ever continue to make it the unique center of harmony amongst all religions." Everyone prayed like that with folded palms. Swamiji next called the disciple and said, "None of us sannyasis have any longer the right to take back this casket of Sri Ramakrishna, for we have installed him here today. It behoves on you therefore to take it on your head back to Nilambar Babu's garden." Seeing that the disciple hesitated to touch the casket, Swami said, "No fear, touch it, you have my order." The disciple gladly obeyed the injunction, lifted the casket on his head and moved on. He went first, next came Swamiji, and the rest followed. Swamiji said to the disciple on the way, "Sri Ramakrishna has today sat on your head and is blessing you. Take care, never let your mind think of anything transitory from this day forth." Before crossing a small bridge, Swamiji again said to him, "Beware, now you must move very cautiously." Thus all safely reached the mutt and rejoiced. Swamiji now entered into a conversation with the disciple, in the course of which he said, "Through the will of Sri Ramakrishna, his Dharmakshetra sanctified spot has been established today. A 12 years anxiety is off my head. Do you know what I am thinking of at this moment? This mutt will be a center of learning and spiritual discipline. Householders of a virtuous turn like yourselves will build houses on the surrounding land and live there, and sannyasis, men of renunciation, will live in the center, while on that plot of land on the south of the mutt, buildings will be erected for English and American disciples to live in. How do you like this idea, disciples? Sir, it is indeed a wonderful fancy of yours." Swamiji, "A fancy, do you call it? Not at all. Everything will come about in time. I am but laying the foundation. There will be lot of further developments in future. Some portion of it I shall leave to work out, and I shall infuse into you fellows various ideas which you will work out in future. It will not do merely to listen to great principles. You must apply them in the practical field, turn them into constant practice. What will be the good of cramming the high sounding dicta of the scriptures? You have first to grasp the teachings of the Shastras and then to work them out in practical life. Do you understand? This is called a practical religion." Thus the talk went on and gradually drifted to the topic of Shankaracharya. The disciple was a great adherent of Shankara, almost to the point of fanaticism. He used to look upon Shankara's Advaita philosophy as the crest of all philosophies and could not bear any criticism of him. Swamiji was aware of this, and as was his wont, wanted to break this one-sidedness of the disciple. Swamiji, Sankara's intellect was sharp like the razor. He was a good argumentator and a scholar, no doubt of that, but he had no great liberality. His heart too seems to have been like that. Besides, he used to take great pride in his Brahmanism, much like a southern Brahmin of the priest class. You may say how he has defended in his commentary on the Vedanta Sutras that the non-Brahmin caste will not attain to a supreme knowledge of Brahma, and how spacious arguments. Referring to Vidura, he has said that he became a knower of Brahma by reason of his Brahmin body in the previous incarnation. Well, if nowadays any Shudra attains to a knowledge of Brahma, shall we have to side with your Shankara and maintain that because he had been a Brahman in his previous birth, therefore he has attained to this knowledge? Goodness, what is the use of dragging in Brahmanism with no much ado? The Vedas have entitled anyone belonging to the three upper castes to a study of the Vedas and the realization of Brahma. Have not they? So Sankara had no need whatsoever of displaying this curious bit of pedantry on this subject contrary to the Vedas, and such was his heart that he burnt to death lots of Buddhist monk by defeating them in argument, and the Buddhists too were foolish enough to burn themselves to death simply because they were worsted in argument. What can you call such an action on Shankara's part except fantasism? But look at Buddha's heart, ever ready to give his own life to save the life of even a kid. What to speak of Bahujan Hitaya, Bahujan Sukhaya, for the welfare of the many, for the happiness of the many. See what a large heartedness, what a compassion. Disciple, can't we call that attitude of Buddha too as another kind of fanaticism, sir? He went to the length of sacrificing his own body for the sake of a beast, Swamiji. But consider how much good to the world and its beings came out of that fanaticism of his. How many monasteries and schools and colleges, how many public hospitals and veterinary refuges were established, how developed architecture became. Think of that. What was there in this country before Buddha's advent? Only a number of religious principles recorded on bundles of palm leaves, and those too known only to a few. It was Lord Buddha who brought them down to the practical field and showed how to apply them in the everyday life of the people. In a sense, he was the living embodiment of true Vedanta disciple. But, sir, it was he who, by breaking down the Varnasrama Dharma duty according to caste and order of life, brought about a revolution within the fold of Hinduism in India, and there seems to be some truth also in the remark that the religion we preached was for this reason banished in course of time from the soil of India. Swamiji, it was not through his teachings that Buddhism came to such degradation, it was the fault of his followers. By becoming too philosophic, they lost much of their breadth of heart. Then gradually the corruption known as Vamachara, unrestrained mixing with women in the name of religion, crept in and ruined Buddhism. Such diabolical rites are not to be met with any modern tantra. One of the principal centers of Buddhism was Jagannath Puri, and you have simply to go there and look at the abominable figures carved on the temple walls to the convinced of this. Puri has come under the sway of the Vaishnavas since the time of Ramanuja and Sri Chaitanya. Through the influence of great personages like these, the place now wears an altogether different aspect. Disciples, sir, the Shastras tell us of various special influences attaching to places of pilgrimage. How far is this claim true? Swamiji, when the whole world is form universal of the eternal Atma, the Ishvara, what is there to wonder at the special influence attaching to particular places. There are places where he manifests himself specially, either spontaneously or through the earnest longing of pure souls and ordinary men. If he visits those places with eagerness, attains his and quite easily. Therefore, it may lead to the development of the self in time to have recourse to holy places. But know it for certain that there is no great tirtha holy spot than the body of man. Nowhere else is the Atma so manifest as here. That car of Jagannath that you see is but a concrete symbol of this corporeal car. You have to behold the Atma in this car of the body. Have not you read Atmanam Rathin Virjihi? Know the Atma to be seated on the chariot, etc. Madhve Vamanamason Visve Deva Upasate. All the gods worship the Vamana, the supreme being in a diminutive form, seated in the interior of the body. The sight of the Atma is the real vision of Jagannatha, and the statement Rathe ch Vamanam Drashta Punarjanam ne Vidyate. Seeing the Vamana on the car, one is no more subject to rebirth. Means that if you can visualize the Atma which is within you and disregarding which you are always identifying yourself with this curious mass of matter, this body of yours, if you can see that, then there is no more rebirth for you. If the sight of the Lord's image on a wooden frame were confirmed liberation on people, then crores of them would be liberated every year, especially with such facility of communication by rail nowadays. But I do not mean to say that the notion which devotees in general entertain towards Sri Jagannatha is either nothing or erroneous. There is a class of people who gradually rise to higher and higher truths with the help of that image. So it is an undoubted fact that in and through that image there is a special manifestation of the Lord. Disciple, sir, are there different religions than for the ignorant and the wise? Swamiji, quite so. Otherwise, why do your scripture go to such lengths for the specification of the qualifications of an aspirant? All is truth, no doubt, but relative truth different in degrees. Whatever man knows to be truth is of a like nature. Some are lesser truths, other higher ones in comparison to them, while the absolute truth is God alone. This Atma is altogether dormant in matter in man, designated as a living being. It is partially conscious, while in personages like Sri Krishna, Buddha, and Sankara, the same Atma has reached the superconscious stage. There is a state even beyond that which cannot be expressed in terms of thought or language. Avang Manso Gocharam. Disciples, sir, there are certain bhakti sects who hold that we must practice devotion by placing ourselves in a particular attitude or relation with God. They do not understand anything about the glory of the Atma and so forth, and exclusively recommend this constant devotion attitude. Shivanji, what they say is true to their own case. By continued practice along this line, they too shall feel an awakening of Brahma within them. And what we sannyasis are doing is another kind of practice. We have renounced the world, so how will it suit us to practice by putting ourselves in some worldly relation, such as that of mother or father or wife or son and so forth, with God? To us, all these ideals appear to be narrow. Of course, it is very difficult to qualify for the worship of God in His absolute, unconditioned aspect. But must we go in for poison because we get no nectar? Always talk and hear and reason about this Atma. By continuing to practice in this way, you will find in time that the lion Brahma will wake up in you too. Go beyond all those relative attitudes, mere sports of the mind. Listen to what Yama says in the Katha Upanishad. Uttishtat Jagrit Prapah Vara Nidbodhatah. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Here the subject was brought to a close. The bell for taking prasada rang and Swamiji went to partake of it, followed by the disciple. So I end the video here. The next video will start with talk number 15. So thank you my dear friends for watching this video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot. Namaskar. Namaste.